Okay, so let us begin with explaining the different representations of different numbers. So whether it be fractions, decimals, percentages, so you kind of have a strong understanding. So later on, nothing really tricks you. There's multiple ways of checking your work because you might have to use different. Sometimes you might have to use fractions when you're doing mechanics. Sometimes you have to use percentages when you're calculating for investment, for example. So all these will come up sooner or later. So let's just build a strong case for what each means and work away from there. So let's start with the number 3 over 8. Now you punch that into your calculator, 0.375, which is equal to 37.5%. Now the first way of kind of seeing this, well, I think the best way is one of the examples that was brought up in class that dealt with color squares and non-color squares. So let's just draw first a box of 8 squares in total. So 2, 4, 6, and 8. So here's what we're saying. So we got 8 squares, 3 of which are colored, and what does that leave? 5 squares uncolored. Let me just draw, to make it easier to see, draw that in different colors. So that's the best way of, I think, kind of imagining what a fraction really is. I mean, essentially fraction is really a division. So you can really say 3 divided by 8, or you can keep it like that and just say 3 over 8. There's different ways of calling it whatever you want, but essentially it means the same thing. I mean, we're just trying to represent, hey, maybe we're trying to say there's total of 8 people in the class and 3 are short, for example, leaving 5 that are tall. You just want to have a clear structure of what you mean, and essentially that's what it means. The number at the top is we're saying out of the denominator, which is at the bottom, out of 8, 3 of them are this. Whatever your criteria is. So if we have 8 consoles, 3 of them are Xboxes, 5 of them are PlayStations, however way you want to look at it. That's essentially the best way of looking at this. Now the second number. The second number is what you get when you actually punch it into the calculator. So depending on what kind of math you're dealing with, and we'll see later in examples, you may want to have it represented like this, which means the same thing. It might be hard to see, that 0.375 is the same as saying 3 out of 8 things are this, or whatever criteria you want. And that's why they kind of developed what this guy over here, percentages. So you just, whatever division you punched in your calculator, you just multiply that by 100%. I kind of keep the symbol percent symbol to remember that I'm dealing with percent. So you multiply that by 100, so you move the decimal 2 to the right, 1, 2, essentially given this. So everybody's familiar with what 50% means. 50% is 1/2, and essentially they just did the same thing we did. So 1 over 2 punch down your calculator is really 0.5, and depending on what kind of math you're using, you may not have a good understanding of, hey, 0.5 of this, 0.5 of that, but you might have a better way of describing things as 50% of this. When you're actually doing calculations, you're going to use this number. If you're not dealing with fractions, if you're not dealing with adding, let's just say you want a percent of something, dealing with this is the best way, or you can deal with the fractions, but this final percentage, unless you're really comfortable with math and arithmetic, and you know that you have the number that was multiplied by 100%, then I guess you can deal with that and then convert back to what it really means, whether it's fraction form or decimal form. So What is another example? So let's take 9 over 10. Okay. So again, what do we have? I'm not going to draw it out, but we can imagine this. We'll have 10 boxes in total. 9 are colored. 9 are, sorry, 9 are colored. 1 is non-colored. And now that's essentially equal to 0.9. But that doesn't really have a nice look to it. I mean, you can do calculations with it, but when you want to really talk to somebody about what that really means, 9 over 10 is a good way of saying it, or 9%. So, when you have statistics, nobody really says 0.9 out of the population is this certain criteria. They really deal with percentage, and that's kind of an easy way of people really understanding what it really means. So essentially these three things, so 1, 2, and 3, are all the same meaning. They mean the same thing. It's easier at certain times to say 50% of the class is this. For example, 50% of the class has black hair. You really don't want to say 0.5 factor of like the total amount of people in the class have black hair. That so that might strike some people as odd. They might kind of look at you funny. Or you can say 1/2 of the class. People are more comfortable with that, I think. So we'll see later on in different examples, and as we get into more detail, when each of them really finds its own avenue to be most effective. So you want to of course be accurate, but you also want to be very effective in how you use your time.